Okay, so moving forward on to differences in stress and prevention of stress. One thing we talk about, and I've probably used this term a lot of times in the past already, is a moderator. Moderator is a third variable that affects the relationship between two other variables, predictor and outcome. There's two different ways that a moderator can affect this relationship, either affecting the strength of the relationship or changing the direction of the relationship. This kind of goes into what I said about correlations when we were talking about research methods and statistics, how sometimes there's a third variable that accounts for the relationship. This isn't exactly the same thing, but it's kind of along those lines. But the moderator more specifically, and the thing you should remember most is that it affects that relationship by either changing the strength or changing the direction. And I'll show you kind of what that looks like in a couple slides. Um, so individual differences are moderators of that stress or strain relationship. If you remember a couple videos ago, I showed you how stressors result in strain. So moderators between that relationship between stressor, perceived stress, and strain include a lot of different individual differences. One of the main ones is locus of control. I've defined this for you before, but basically it's that belief of whether or not what happens to you in your life is under your own control, internal locus, or beyond your control, external. Internal locus of control results in lower strain relative to external, and that has something to do with the fact that people who have this internal locus of control, they're usually more likely to take active coping strategies because they believe they can influence their stress and their strain. But people with external locus of control tend to be more negative about how there's nothing they can do. Um, so, so this term called hardiness, which kind of talks about both that control you feel you have over your life, but also your commitment to your goal being more important than the stress or the strain, and the tendency to view stress as challenge rather than hindrance or obstacles. Remember, again, that distinction between a challenge and a hindrance stressor. That's something you're going to want to be thinking about as you think about stress. Do you view it as a challenge, something that you can rise to, or a hindrance, something that's going to stop you? And hardiness will result in lower strain and higher productive coping strategies. So these things affect the relationship almost through the relationship with other moderators, such as coping strategy. Another one is self-esteem. Having positive self-worth results in more productive coping strategies, um, and so on and so forth. A lot of these personal, attributes of I'm good enough, this is important, this is a challenge, this is something I can rise to, I have control over this. All of these attitudes will result in more positive, productive coping and less strain. So for what that kind of looks like is, again, here's this pathway that I showed you. Stressors lead to your perception of stress, which leads to your strain. And things like how you feel may result in different levels of perceived stress, and some of your self-esteem or your locus of control, those types of things can affect that relationship to strain. So you're going to have less strain. I want to get more in depth. So this picture right here on your screen is what it looks like when we draw models with moderators. So we kind of just use these little pointing arrows and boxes to show broadly what a theory or a finding is. But I'm going to show you what it would look like along the kind of scatter plot or line graph axes. So if you remember, we talked about stress and performance. With stress as a predictor and the outcome being performance. And the relationship here is not a linear one. You see that stress will increase performance through its kind of really stress being a form of arousal, but it will also decrease performance when the stress gets to be too much. But what does it look like with moderators? Remember, we talked about some moderators affecting strength and some affecting direction. So let me show you what that looks like here. So our first model, locus of control, let's say you have a high locus of control. And a high locus of control, I'm going to show you guys by using a dotted line. So a high locus of control, the relationship between stress and performance would look probably more like this. Right? It's kind of a linear up. Whereas a low locus of control, which I'm going to do a straight line, it might look something like this. So as your stress goes up, your locus of, or your performance goes down. And if you have a high locus of control, as your stress goes up, your performance goes up because you might view it as a challenge, you might put more energy into it. And this is an example of a moderator that shows a change in direction. That's what it would look like. I'm writing with my mouse, so forgive me. But this is a change in direction. So moderators that show a change in direction will look like this on a graph. Autonomy, on the other hand, so let's see, you have really, really low autonomy. And if we start here, let me see if I will show you with a different color. So let's use purple for this one. So a dotted purple line is going to represent low autonomy. So if you have low autonomy, meaning you don't get a lot of choice at work, experiencing stress and performance will probably look, let's start here in the middle. Stress is kind of high. It's going to you're just going to plummet, right? But if you have high, which I'm going to show with a straight line, you might still see kind of reduction in performance, but the line will not be as sharp. So this is a difference of strength. A slope that's like in this direction, going like straight down, versus a slope that's more of a slight down. And I'm sorry, it's really messy. I don't have a real pen right now. But so they're both going in the same direction, but the strength is different. Whereas the locus of control example, they're going in different directions. So that is what moderators do to these pathways. They show a difference of strength and a difference of direction, one or the other. So keep that in mind, maybe graph that out yourself so you can kind of understand what it means. And try to think of some other examples of moderators and whether or not what they change its direction or. And the thing about moderators that you do want to consider when we're graphing them in this way is that they're usually categorical variables. So, for example, locus of control, you're high or you're low. It's not on a continuum the way that the other two variables we're looking at, performance and stress, are. They're things that you can group people into one or the other so you can compare the two groups. And that's the easiest way to conceptualize. So moving on, occupational health psychology is a field of psychology that focuses a lot on stress. And I've mentioned it before also, but it specifically involves the application of psychology to improve the quality of work life and promote safety, health, and well-being of others. And that is kind of a sub-area of IO. And within this field, we've come up with 3 approaches to workplace stress management. The first is the primary prevention, which is a stress prevention strategy that's concerned with modifying or eliminating stressors in the work environment. So the primary prevention, first line, just get rid of the things that are causing stress. Secondary prevention is stress prevention that involves modifying responses to inevitable demands or stressors. So this might be more of that emotion-based coping. Primary prevention might be problem-based. Secondary prevention is maybe emotion-based, is where you look inward and you modify how you behave or feel or respond to the stressors. Tertiary prevention is a focus on healing the negative effects. So you can't prevent the stressors and you can't prevent your response to it or change it, but you can work on helping to heal the negative outcomes of it. So let's talk about some examples of those. Primary prevention strategies include stressor-directed, so you're focusing on the stressor itself, and you can do this through work and job design, eliminating or reducing physical stressors, changing tasks or making them more clear, autonomous, those role stressors I talked about. It's anything that involves focusing on those things that stressors themselves. Um, you can also kind of move a little bit into that secondary, but it's still considered primary to do cognitive restructuring, which is an intervention that focuses on changing your perceptions and thought processes that lead to stress. So sometimes it's not necessarily even, the stressor is not even the job itself, but maybe people's cognitions about the job itself. And this will increase people's stress management and their self-efficacy if you make this kind of effort. But, before you go into cognitive restructuring, make sure that it isn't actually something in the job design that needs to be changed. And this strategy, this primary prevention strategy, is considered an incredibly proactive strategy, and probably one of the best for that reason, because it occurs before the worker is exposed to the stressor. So the stressor never even happens at all. Secondary prevention is, of course, response directed. So it's a moderators of the stressor to strain relation. So these include things like stress management training, where we learn to kind of cope and deal with our workplace stressors, or the ones that are difficult to change or remove, which is also described as cognitive behavior training, and this combines the primary and secondary prevention strategies. You could use stress inoculation, which inoculation is actually a medical term, but it kind of consists of exposing people to what these stressors are, learning how you've responded to them, rehearsing coping strategies, and then applying them under the actual situation, or simulations of the situation. And prior research has found that this significantly reduces strain and enhances organizational effectiveness. So stress management training is a secondary prevention strategy. Another is relaxation. Finding ways to disconnect from work and relax and help progressively relax the entire body. This can be things like, that treat yourself idea. Mindfulness meditation is a popular one right now, which is a strategy of kind of being mindful of the way you think, which helps you to manage emotions under stress, and it also incorporates relaxation. They also have some ideas about actually teaching people to control the physical responses they have to stress, but it's a little bit expensive and a little bit involved, and not very many people are using this. Other basic methods of secondary prevention are as simple as social support, having comfort, assistance, or something that you receive through contact, your friends, your family, your support system. Those are, it seems intuitive, but they're basic needs that we have, and they're also prevention strategies for stress. There's a couple different types of this. So direct help from someone, which is instrumental or tangible, often in the form of meeting a need, someone helping you out by covering your shift, lending you money, providing food. There's also emotional. This is possibly more important than, but equally important at least, as instrumental support. So this is when someone is just compassionate or sympathetic towards you when you're having difficulties. Informational is also another way that social support can happen, and this is all very intuitive, so I'm kind of just going through it. People can help you solve problems, and that's, there's a lot of ways to do this. And also appraisal, which is when someone provides feedback about you, and it's very motivational. Things like, I believe in you, you're doing great, these types of things. And sometimes it's even a little bit more critical as long as it's constructive criticism. So social support is one of those moderators that would occur between the stress and strain relationship, and it will reduce the extent to which stressors result in strain. And that effect is known as the buffer or moderator hypothesis. So that's it for secondary prevention. Definitely go back through and look at these. You might use them in an assignment, or you might just be interested in talking about them some more. Tertiary prevention strategies include symptom-directed. So if you remember, tertiary prevention strategies are things that focus on, the stressor has happened, it's resulted in strain, how do we deal with the strain? So did you get sick from being overworked? That's, medical care, psychotherapy, career counseling. And we have programs for that, employee assistance programs, which are counseling services provided by the organization to deal with workplace stress or difficulties and problems even stemming from outside the job. These are pretty rare, so you don't see them a lot, but they would be good. I think it would be great for people to actually implement something like this in organizations more. Um, they are, we talked about utility analysis before, this idea of is it worth investing in these programs for the organization? And research has found that these are pretty cost effective because they're not too expensive and they reduce absences, accidents, and health. It is widely believed that tertiary prevention, which are more reactive and symptom directed, should only be used to complement primary, secondary prevention strategies. You want to, whenever you can, start at the source, help people to cope, and then if you have to, because some jobs you just can't escape that strain, then bring in these tertiary strategies. But definitely think about maybe work you know of or work you do, and the stressors that are there and what could be done. Right now, I think we're dealing with a lot of people looking for these tertiary strategies because there is absolutely almost nothing we can do to prevent the fact that a lot of workers are stressed right now and a lot of workers are out of work and stressed because of that right now. So yeah, definitely be thinking about what all of these companies are doing right now and what these workers are experiencing. We'll have one more lecture group area, what do you call this, a short video for this week's lecture, and then I will get to the following one, which will be on diversity. So come back for the last video of the workplace stress lectures.